For years, my family made sure I never forgot that I was different. Different because I spoke my mind. Different because I refused to play their games of appearances and secrets. When each cousin got married, I watched from the sidelines, scrolling through photos, pretending not to care. But the truth? It broke something inside me every single time. My own mother said, "It's better if you don't come, Lena. You'd make people uncomfortable." So, I stopped waiting for invitations. I started building something bigger. A life that was mine, loud and unapologetic. When I met Noah, I didn't just find love, I found courage. And when we planned our wedding, I made sure every person who had excluded me got an invitation. With front row seats, because this time they were going to witness what different really looked like. My name is Lena Brooks, and in my family I was always the odd one. I didn't wear designer heels or gossip over champagne. I read books, painted, and spoke my mind. 3 crimes in a world obsessed with fitting in. My mother once told me, "You'd understand if you were more like your cousins." She said it gently, but I felt the sting. Family gatherings were polite cages, smiles stretched thin, laughter rehearsed. I stood out like a cracked frame on a wall of perfection. When my cousins planned their weddings, they called everyone but me. I told myself it didn't matter, but every photo I saw online said otherwise. Perfect tables, perfect dresses, and me perfectly forgotten. I didn't know it then, but that exclusion would one day become my power. It started with Abby's wedding. I found out through Instagram, her standing beneath a floral arch, bridesmaids glowing, and my mother smiling in the background. I froze, staring at the screen. "You didn't tell me you were going," I said later, my voice trembling. She sighed. "Lena, Abby's wedding was small. It wasn't personal, but it was. Everything about it was. My seat was empty because I wasn't their kind of family. I remembered helping Abby with homework, sharing secrets under blankets as kids. Now I was a ghost in her life story. That night, I deleted every photo and promised myself never to cry over people who could celebrate without me. I didn't realize that promise would break again, many times, before it healed. Each new wedding announcement felt like déjà vu. Cousin Mark in Maui, Elise in Tuscany, aunts posting "so proud," while tagging everyone but me. I learned to smile through the sting, to scroll, double tap, and pretend it didn't hurt. My friends pitied me. "Who needs them?" they'd say. But blood rejection cuts deeper than friendship comfort. I'd sit on my balcony, watching the city lights shimmer, imagining their laughter echoing somewhere I wasn't welcome. Sometimes I'd write their names in my sketchbook, then cross them out one by one. It wasn't hate, it was grief. I had lost them long before the weddings began. The cruelest part wasn't being left out, it was realizing no one noticed I was gone. When my brother's engagement came, I thought maybe things had changed. "You'll be there, right?" I asked, trying to sound casual. My mother hesitated, eyes darting away. "Lena, it's just his fiancé wants a certain image. You know how families talk." I felt my chest tighten. "You mean your family?" She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That silence was the loudest rejection of all. On the day of the wedding, I sat at home with cold coffee and a playlist that couldn't drown my thoughts. Later that night, she called. "It was beautiful." "You were missed," I laughed bitterly. "No, Mom, I was erased." That conversation was the last time I asked for a seat at their table. From then on, I began building my own. By the time the 4th cousin got married, the pattern was clear. I wasn't family. Not really. I was an accessory they'd outgrown. "You're too blunt," they'd say. "You make people uncomfortable." Translation, I didn't pretend. My aunt once told me, "You'd understand someday when you settle down." But settle down to what? Hypocrisy? When I stopped showing up for family holidays, no one called. The group chats continued without me. Photos, jokes, endless plans. They didn't hate me. They just didn't see me. I became invisible by design, their family's beautiful illusion uncracked. But deep down I was learning. Every slight, every exclusion. It was shaping me, sharpening me for something bigger. the words always came dressed as concern. You should smile more. Maybe wear something softer. You don't have to be so intense. Every suggestion chipped away at who I was. Once, at Christmas dinner, my uncle joked, "At least Lena won't have to worry about a wedding. No one could handle her." Everyone laughed. I did too, but my hands trembled under the table. That night I stood in front of the mirror and whispered, "You're not the problem." It became my mantra. I started journaling, sketching, traveling, anything that reminded me life existed beyond their approval. They thought they'd silenced me, but in truth, they'd just given me time to find my voice. After the 5th wedding I wasn't invited to, I stopped counting. I stood in my apartment one rainy night, scrolling past another family photo where everyone looked complete, except they weren't. They just didn't know it. I stared at that image until my vision blurred and said softly to myself, "One day, they'll remember who they left behind." Not through vengeance, but through presence. I didn't want to destroy them. I wanted to outgrow them. I started saving, dreaming, designing pieces of my own future. The hurt became the purpose. The silence became fuel. And though they'd never know it, every rejection was building the moment they'd never forget. My moment. When I packed my bags for the city, I didn't take much. Just a few clothes, my sketchbook, and the will to start over. The skyline greeted me with cold beauty, like freedom wearing high heels. I rented a small studio that smelled of paint and potential. The neighbors didn't know my past, and that was the best part. Every morning I walked to a cafe that became my haven. No one cared about my family name. No one compared me to anyone else. I could just be. For the first time in years, I felt air fill my lungs without guilt. My old life was fading, replaced by something raw and real. I told myself Lena Brooks is gone. The woman I'm becoming doesn't beg for belonging. She creates it. It was raining when I met Noah Carter. I ducked into a bookstore to escape the storm, and he was there. Soaked, laughing, holding 2 coffees. "You look like you need one," he said, offering me a cup. We talked for hours between the aisles, surrounded by stories that somehow mirrored our own. He didn't flinch when I mentioned my estranged family. He just nodded and said, "Sometimes blood isn't thicker, it's just louder." That line stayed with me. Noah wasn't perfect, but he was genuine, the kind of person who looked at you and saw you. Over the next few months, we became inseparable. Art shows, cheap dinners, midnight walks. I wasn't used to being understood. But with Noah, silence felt safe. I didn't know it then, but this man would rewrite the ending of every story I'd ever been left out of. Noah and I built our world one late-night conversation at a time. We'd sit by my window sharing fries and dreams. He'd ask, "What would your life look like if you didn't care what anyone thought?" I didn't have an answer. He smiled. "Then that's what we'll build." Together, we started sketching out our version of happiness. Small, imperfect, real. He told me he'd grown up without much family, so maybe that's why he valued connection the way others valued gold. I showed him my art, the sketches of faces I used to miss. "You're turning pain into beauty," he said softly. For the first time, I realized belonging isn't about being invited. It's about creating a space where your soul fits. With him, I didn't have to explain myself. I just had to exist. When I told my mother about Noah, she didn't even try to hide her disdain. "You met him online?" She scoffed. "Lena, that's desperate." My aunt chimed in. "What does he do? Is he stable?" Their tone dripped with polished cruelty. I hung up, staring at the phone in disbelief. I wanted to scream. I found someone who loves me for me. But what was the point? They'd never understand. Later that night, I sat with Noah on the rooftop. He held my hand, eyes steady. "They don't define you," he said. "They only taught you what love isn't." His words felt like medicine, painful, necessary, healing. That's when I realized I wasn't running from them anymore. I was walking toward the life I deserved. And I wasn't going alone. It wasn't grand or staged for cameras. Noah proposed on the same rooftop where we'd had our first fight. the place where truth had always lived between us. The city lights flickered below as he handed me a small box. "You've built your world from pieces others threw away," he said. "Can I build the rest with you?" My heart stopped. There was no orchestra, no diamond big enough to post. Just sincerity so deep it brought me to tears. "Yes," I whispered. 1,000 times yes. We laughed, cried, and danced under the stars. I thought of all the weddings I'd never attended, all the people who thought I'd never have one. They had no idea. My love story was beginning exactly where theirs ended, with truth, not pretense. Our wedding planning was chaos wrapped in joy. No planners, no fancy venues, just us, a few close friends, and a dream that felt like freedom. I designed my own dress. Simple ivory silk, bare feet, and wildflowers in my hair. We rented an old greenhouse for the ceremony, filled it with candles and mismatched chairs. Every detail was personal. Each flower, each song, each moment stitched together with meaning. "You're not following tradition," my coworker said. I smiled. Tradition never included me anyway. Noah agreed. "Let's make our own." For the first time, I was planning something not for approval, but for love. And yet, deep down, a spark of defiance grew stronger. I knew exactly who would receive my first invitations, the same people who never sent me theirs. The gold ink shimmered as I wrote each name: my mother, my cousins, my aunts. Every envelope was a message. I'm not excluded anymore. I didn't send them out of spite. I sent them because I was finally strong enough not to care if they came. Still, part of me hoped they'd see what love without judgment looked like. When Noah saw the list, he raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure?" I nodded. "They left me out for years. I just want them to know I didn't disappear." I thrived. When the invitations went out, I felt something powerful release in me. The same hands that once shook from rejection were now steady with purpose. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for permission to belong. I was inviting them into my happiness. On my terms, it started with a ding. Then another. Within minutes, the family group chat, the one I was removed from years ago, was on fire. Is she serious? Why would she invite us? Maybe it's a prank. I watched the messages pour in like a storm I'd already survived. For years, that chat had been my silent reminder that I didn't belong. Now they couldn't stop talking about me. Noah glanced over my shoulder, smirking. "Seems like they got the message." I nodded. For once, I wasn't angry. I was amused. Let them wonder why I'd reached out. Let them drown in curiosity. My invitation wasn't an olive branch. It was a mirror, one that reflected everything they'd chosen to ignore. My phone rang the next morning. "Aunt Valerie." I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. "Lena, honey," she began, her voice sugary sweet. "Are you sure you want us there? You know how people talk." Her tone dripped with fake concern. I smiled into the silence. "I'm sure," I said calmly. "It wouldn't feel right without the whole family." She hesitated. "After everything that's happened?" I took a breath. Exactly because of everything that's happened. When the call ended, I laughed softly. That woman once told me I'd embarrass the family name. Now, she was afraid I'd be the one embarrassed. Not this time. This time, the stage was mine, and they were my audience. More calls followed. Cousins, old friends, even my mother. Each conversation started the same way. Disbelief, judgment, and a hint of fear. "Why now, Lena? What are you trying to prove?" I gave the same answer every time. Soft, steady, unshaken. "I just want everyone to see what love looks like." They thought it was humility. It wasn't. It was truth wrapped in poise. Deep down, I wanted them to see that the girl they had erased had built something magnificent out of the ashes. I wasn't their black sheep anymore. I was the phoenix. When I hung up, Noah hugged me from behind. "You okay?" he asked. "I'm better than okay," I said. "They'll come. Not because they want to, but because they need to see who I've become." Our apartment turned into a creative battlefield. Fabric, flowers, lights, chaos everywhere. My friends, artists and dreamers like me, worked tirelessly to transform the greenhouse into a wonderland. The air buzzed with laughter, the kind that doesn't need permission to exist. Music played, candles burned, and love filled the space. Every color, every detail told a story, my story. Noah painted the aisle sign himself. To the ones who doubted, thank you for the fire. It made me tear up. This wedding wasn't just a celebration. It was closure wrapped in beauty. For every insult, every rejection, every empty chair I'd faced, there would now be light, warmth, and presence. The dress was nothing like the ones I'd seen at my cousin's weddings. No glittering crystals, no stiff corsets. I designed it myself, flowing silk with subtle embroidery of wildflowers across the hem, each representing resilience. I slipped it on in front of the mirror, my heart fluttering. For once, I didn't see someone too different. I saw someone real. Noah entered, eyes soft. "You look like freedom," he whispered. I smiled. That's exactly what I wanted. My reflection no longer carried their judgment. It carried my truth. I'd spent years trying to fit into their pale perfection. Now I was radiant in my own color. This wasn't rebellion. It was a revelation. A week before the wedding, the whispers started. She's doing this for attention. Probably rented a cheap venue. That dress? Homemade? Every word trickled back to me through mutual acquaintances. But instead of pain, I felt peace. Their gossip was predictable, a desperate attempt to hold on to the narrative they'd built about me. I didn't bother defending myself. Why would I? The truth was about to be displayed in candlelight and vows, not words and rumors. I smiled and deleted every message that carried their venom. Let them talk. They were giving me free publicity for my own triumph. The night before the wedding, I stood alone in the greenhouse, surrounded by flickering lights and flowers still being arranged. I breathed in the scent of roses and rain. This was my stage, not of revenge, but of redemption. I didn't feel nervous. I felt powerful. Tomorrow, they'd all see what love and resilience could build without their approval. I closed my eyes, whispering to myself, let them wonder. Let them talk. Tomorrow they'll understand. I turned off the lights and smiled, the silence echoing my calm. The girl who once begged for inclusion was gone. The woman standing here had already won, before a single guest arrived. By noon, the greenhouse glowed like a dream under soft winter sunlight. The scent of jasmine floated through the air as the first guests arrived. I watched from behind a curtain as familiar faces, my cousins, uncles, even my mother, walked in with forced smiles. Their expensive clothes couldn't hide their discomfort. They expected tacky or desperate. What they found was elegance wrapped in confidence. Some whispered. Others pretended not to notice me. My father stood near the entrance, sunglasses hiding eyes that once held judgment. For a moment I pitied them. They didn't realize this wasn't about revenge. It was about reflection. I took a deep breath, ready to show them who I had become. The music started, soft, nostalgic, the very song my grandmother used to hum while I painted as a child. I had chosen it for her, the only family who ever believed in my art. The guests shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the tune they had long forgotten. I walked down the aisle, not in submission but in victory. Every petal beneath my feet felt like a step away from their judgment. Noah's eyes met mine, steady, proud, unafraid. Around us, the air thickened with quiet realization. The outcast they once mocked was now radiant, calm, complete. By the time I reached him, the whispers had stopped entirely. From the altar, I could see my father sitting in the back row. His shoulders slumped, his hands clenched tight around the program. When our eyes met, he looked away, too late, too guilty. I remembered the years of being told I wasn't family material. He used to say art was a phase, that love wouldn't pay bills. Yet here I stood, surrounded by the beauty I had created. For a fleeting second, I wished he'd smile, even faintly, but his pride wouldn't allow it. That's when I realized something powerful. I didn't need his approval anymore. His silence was my final confirmation. I had already surpassed his imagination. When Noah began his vows, the world seemed to still. "Lena," he said, voice trembling slightly, "you taught me that being different isn't a flaw, it's art in motion. You made me believe that courage can bloom in silence." His words hit deeper than I expected. Around us, even the judgmental cousins were quiet. His sincerity disarmed them. Noah wasn't just marrying me, he was honoring every wound I had carried, every wall I'd climbed. My throat tightened. For once, I didn't care about perfection or presentation. This was real. The vows weren't polished lines. They were proof that love, unfiltered and fearless, can rewrite even the cruelest narratives. After the applause faded, I stepped forward and reached for the microphone. The guests straightened, expecting a polite thank you speech. I smiled softly. To the family who never invited me to their weddings. Gasps filled the air. "Thank you. You taught me how to host my own." My words weren't sharp. They were measured, graceful, but they cut deeper than rage ever could. I looked around the room, making eye contact with each familiar face. I used to think I needed your acceptance to belong. But I've realized I was never meant to fit into small spaces. A stunned silence followed. The truth had finally found its stage. For a long moment, no one moved. Then from the back, I saw my mother wipe away a tear. It was small, hesitant, like a confession. The cousins exchanged uncertain looks. The arrogance in their smiles had faded. My father stared at the floor, jaw tight. I continued, "This day isn't about proving anyone wrong. It's about showing what love can build when cruelty fails." My voice trembled, but it wasn't a weakness. It was released. The air was heavy with emotion. Even the most judgmental eyes softened. In that moment, forgiveness didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom. I closed my eyes for a second before finishing. "To my family," I said gently, "I forgive you. Not because you've earned it, but because I'm done carrying what you broke." The audience stayed frozen, absorbing every syllable. "You once made me believe I wasn't enough. But today, I see that I was simply too much for your small hearts." Gasps rippled across the room, followed by a profound stillness. Noah reached for my hand, squeezing it tightly. My chest felt lighter than it had in years. The weight of their opinions fell away like dust. I smiled, graceful, unshaken. The girl they had excluded was gone. In her place stood a woman they'd never forget. Their whispers ended that night. My silence spoke louder than revenge. "Subscribe. You won't believe what came next." After the ceremony, the greenhouse transformed into a golden dream. Candles flickered across the long tables, laughter replaced whispers, and the air shimmered with warmth that felt almost unreal. My guests, my family, ate the food prepared by the very caterers who once refused to serve unconventional weddings. Irony was delicious tonight. Noah raised a glass to love, and I joined him. "To choose peace over pain," I said softly. Even those who had come out of obligation began to smile genuinely. For the first time in years, the room didn't feel divided. It felt human. The outcast had set the table, and everyone finally had a seat. Later in the evening, two of my cousins approached me hesitantly, their makeup fading under the soft lights. "Lena," one whispered, "we didn't realize how wrong we were." I saw shame in their eyes, the kind that doesn't come from guilt, but from understanding too late. I smiled gently. "It's okay," I said. "You were busy fitting in." I was busy finding myself. They looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time, not the girl they'd mocked, but the woman who had turned their cruelty into art. As they walked away, I realized something profound. Forgiveness wasn't about them. It was about freeing me. The music slowed. I found a quiet corner near the fountain, watching the lights shimmer on the glass ceiling. Guests danced, laughed, and toasted. For once, I didn't feel like I had to perform or defend myself. Noah joined me, slipping his arm around my waist. "You did it," he whispered. I smiled, resting my head on his shoulder. "No," I said softly. "We did it." Every hardship, every insult had led to this calm, not explosive triumph, but quiet peace. The kind that seeps into your bones and whispers, "You made it." The kind that can't be taken away. The photographer gathered everyone for a group picture. "Family, please," he called. For a moment, hesitation filled the air. Then my mother took a step forward. One by one, they joined until I stood in the center, right where I was meant to be. Flash. The camera captured not perfection, but truth. My cousins smiled nervously, my father looked away, my friends beamed proudly. It wasn't the photo they imagined. It was better. I wasn't finally accepted into their world. I had built my own, and they were just visiting. That picture would hang on my wall, not as proof of belonging, but of becoming. As the night deepened, my mother found me alone by the rose archway. She looked smaller than I remembered, her pride stripped away. "Lena," she said quietly, voice trembling, "you made me proud today." I blinked, unsure if I'd heard correctly. She reached out, hesitating before taking my hand. "You did what I never could. You stood tall without anyone's permission." My chest tightened, tears threatening to spill. For the first time, her words didn't come from obligation. They came from honesty. I didn't need her validation, but receiving it still healed something deep. "Thank you, Mom," I whispered. "That means more than you know." The music shifted to something slow and wistful. Noah took my hand, leading me barefoot onto the dance floor. The glass ceiling above reflected 1,000 tiny lights, like stars bowing down to witness the moment. We swayed in silence, his heartbeat steady against mine. Around us, laughter softened, blending into a warm hum. I felt weightless, free of resentment, free of trying to prove anything. The girl who once watched others dance from the sidelines was now center stage, not because she demanded it, but because she owned it. The final note lingered like a promise in the air. When the night ended, I stepped outside the greenhouse. The moonlight painted the path silver as Noah took my hand. The venue behind us glowed softly, filled with music and memories. I looked back one last time, not with regret, but gratitude. Every cruel word, every exclusion had led me here. "Ready?" Noah asked. I nodded. "More than ever." We walked into the cool night air, our laughter echoing through the quiet fields. I wasn't the girl they pitied. I was the woman who rewrote the story.